On the surface, it doesn't seem to make much in the way of sense. Not that anything coming out of the nation's capital these days ever does. An economy struggling to regain a certain level of employed, millions of people having simply walked away from the job scene because they have tired of looking and finding nothing. People being forced to take jobs below their station because there is simply nothing else. And then a president who appears to be threatening to allow more people into America who are seeking work. Yes, you may now be completely confused. Let's seek to make this all work here. Welcome back to MidPoint. Former ministerial advisor and senior consultant at Europe Economics, financial guru Jonathan Todd joins us. John, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Ed, thank you.
John, let's get right to the meat of this whole issue here. We have potentially a president who is willing to use his pen, as he has said he will many times, and he will basically bring in more immigrants to the United States, more people seeking work, more people with work permits. Now, again, please correct me if I'm wrong. We have a lot of unemployed in this country right now. We are looking for jobs. People say there are not enough good jobs here, or any jobs for that matter, in certain areas of the country. How do you then in any way, shape, or form justify bringing more workers into a place where there aren't enough jobs right now?
Well, you're absolutely right, Ed. The labor market is in certainly a challenging situation right now. By all measures, unemployment is still too high, and the long-term unemployed has actually come down in the past few months, which is a good sign. But again, the total unemployment rate still a little bit too high. It's actually been especially hard on lower-skilled American workers too. The less education you have, below high school, of course, the higher unemployment rate you have. And so you're right. It would seem to be a bit of a confusing situation to bring in other similar skilled people into an already broad pool of people who are underemployed.
If we're talking about 5 million more people, and again, we're talking millions of illegal immigrants, work permits, save them from deportation, that is from the Mail Online, a number of different outlets that look at it this way. We're looking at 5 million or so here. Jonathan, where do they go? I mean, seriously, and I'm not going to take a side here either way on whether they should or they shouldn't be here, but where do they go for work?
Where do they go for work? Well, it's actually interesting. So the domestic-born workers and foreign-born workers actually operate in two pretty separate labor pools. Foreign workers tend to cluster towards industries like gardening and landscape, agriculture, for example, elderly and childcare, as opposed to lower-skilled American domestic-born workers. They tend to cluster towards other industries like trucking, like lower-level administrative jobs, where communication might actually be a little more important rather than the physical component of labor. So over time, we've actually seen the two different labor pools have actually operated almost completely distinctively from each other.
Is there, again, and this comes back to an old argument that we've heard many people talk about when it comes down to immigration. I even heard my grandfather say it 7 million years ago. He would say that foreign workers are merely taking the jobs that Americans are too proud to take. Is it as simple as saying that? Because that really does seem overly simplistic.
You're right, it does. Actually studies have proven over time, especially from labor economists who focus on agriculture, that Americans have left the farm completely and they just won't take the job, even if wages were to rise substantially. So what actually has happened is that the lower wage workers since about the 1950s have come in and filled those jobs. We're speaking about agriculture specifically right now, leaving Americans to take other sorts of less laborious, low wage jobs. So actually what's happening now is, especially as Mexico's economy is getting richer and the flow of migrants, seasonal migrants, has actually slowed over recent years, there's not actually a replacement one-of-one for foreign-born, low-wage workers like that being replaced by American workers. Instead, they're being replaced by technology, for example. It's kind of like many other wage workers who are being replaced by technology. Same story. Instead of a low-wage immigrant picking, sorting nuts or picking vegetables, and I don't want to make a generalization, but these are the seasonal migrant workers. There's actually new machines that are actually doing the same thing. So the one-for-one trade-off is kind of a false argument to make. It's not actually going to be an American worker replacing these foreign workers.
All right, I'm going to work from the other way around here now, play devil's advocate. Could a temporary amnesty actually boost the economy by putting more people to work, making business owners see that there's more to do, creating more product, creating more money, creating more possible income here? Give me an idea of how far off or how right on this thinking is.
I don't think you're too far off, Ed. There have been studies shown by, again, labor economists like Giovanni Perry over at UC Davis that immigrant workers actually do boost the employment prospects across the economy. So just because you bring in low-wage workers from abroad, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily taking, again, jobs away from domestic native-born workers. Again, studies have shown that it has shown to improve the number of jobs available to low-wage workers. It has shown to improve wages among workers. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually worked out that way. To have that labor pool available has actually opened up more capital towards bringing native domestic workers into the workforce.
What about those who say, and here comes another one of those arguments, they will say that, and again, one side, regardless of the fact that they are actually here illegally, that they're working here illegally, they are still paying taxes. And that there are still municipalities, there's federal government, there's places that are still making money from what they're doing. So is that really a solid argument to be made? Are there big enough numbers there that point out to the fact that, yes, even though they're illegal, in essence, according to what some would say, it helps a lot of people down the line?
There are actually. There was a 2006 study by the state of Texas, and they found that undocumented workers actually cost the state of Texas about $500 million or so in terms of services provided, hospitals, school, extra police needed, that kind of thing. But actually, the same study noted that the same migrant workers increased the GDP of the state by about $18 billion. So that's a pretty good return on assets, if you will. So there are second-order effects by having these people in the economy. They increase demand for housing, especially in lower wage, more impoverished rural areas. They have the effect of reducing costs of food or childcare, that kind of service. And, again, all the second-order effects that filter through the economy by having that many more people who are wage earners, who are going to be consumers in that local area, in that state.
Here's another side of things, though, another part of this argument here, because you talked about homes. Let's go to something else, and this comes down to another economic discussion here. If we have a lot of these young immigrants that are coming into the country, whether they're illegal, whatever, most of them are young. We're talking about women, children. We're also talking about teenagers. We have to put them to school. They can't just sit out there, and they're not just going to sit in a holding facility for any length of time. Most of them do not speak English. We're talking about schools in many parts of the country that are overflowing at this point, that have too many portable units as well. They don't have permanent facilities. They don't have enough books. They don't have enough teachers because there's not enough money to feed all this. And I mean feed into this educational system here itself. Aren't we looking at a breaking point here on the educational system when it comes down to money?
Sure, it's absolutely a strain. You've seen that in a lot of states like Georgia, Alabama, Texas, California, where you do have to educate these kids that come into the state. And of course, there's a financial cost of that. Somebody's going to have to pay the bill for that. But again, that's only one half of the equation there. There's the fiscal cost, but then again, there's the economic benefit of having those workers across the entire economy. So those people might not necessarily be the wage earners, but their families are. Somebody is actually contributing to the economy. And that's offsetting, or in some cases, as studies have shown, more than offsetting the cost of educating those children or treating them in hospitals, that kind of thing.
Isn't it also something that they need to be concerned about, that many of the jobs that would be taken here would be, as you mentioned much earlier, low-skilled jobs? There's only so many of those to begin with. I mean, we are talking about people who, if they're going to become members of society and going to create more taxes, if they're going to buy houses and buy goods, they're going to have to make a little bit more than just $1.95 an hour.
Oh, that's fair. That's absolutely a fair point. They are low-wage workers, but again, their effects on the economy have shown to be positive, and it's again counterintuitive, but these low-wage earners have boosted the economy not only for themselves and their families, but for the people around them in the states and cities they live in.
You think the guest worker program could be a long-term solution where perhaps immigrants come in, work in the country on a provisional basis? Would that make economic sense?
It might. Of course, there's huge issues that have to do with immigration policy that have to be sorted out in Washington, and it seems like we're a long ways off from getting anything resolved there. So I think there is a solution there that can suit everyone's needs. I think the economy needs these workers. I think they do benefit the economy. I think they do need to be responsible, and they do need to be tracked, make sure we don't have criminals or anybody like that is going to come into our society and actually place more of a burden than these workers should. So I think there is a solution there. If we can, maybe keep track of these workers better, have a better system for maintaining knowledge of these workers and ensuring they are contributing to the economy. I think there is like a bipartisan solution here that can be solved.
So many facets of this conversation and so much more to learn. Jonathan, thank you so much. By the way, having lived and worked in Brookline, Massachusetts for a while, please tell them that they no longer have to worry about any sort of police action while we're on the air. I know ComAv must be busy, but they got to keep it a little bit down here during certain times you're doing an interview.
Absolutely.
Let them know. I'm sure they'll want to hear from me and you as well. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. We'll do it again.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, take care. Later on this hour, how worried should America be about the current outbreak of Ebola? And right after the break, you might have missed it, we're going to correct that situation from our sister shows right here on the Newsmax TV network. And we continue on MidPoint, where we question everything.